One of the creepiest and most disturbing true crime cases that I've ever heard is also still very much an unsolved mystery. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Cindy James. Viewer discretion is advised. Today's story takes us to British Columbia, Canada. No. And on June 12th, 1944, that's exactly where Cindy James was born. Cindy's father was an Air Force colonel and her mother was a stay-at-home mom because she has 6 kids to take care of. Cindy grew up in a very loving household. She was taken care of very well by her parents. She loved her siblings. She excelled throughout all of her schooling years, and she graduated high school and then almost immediately went into nursing school. While studying at her nursing school, she met a man who was 20 years older than her. His name was Roy Makepeace, which is probably the coolest last name I've ever heard. Roy was a physician, and when Cindy graduated nursing school in 1966, he would marry her. A short time after she graduated and after the wedding, she finally got herself a job. She was working at a treatment center for kids who had behavioral issues. By 1982, she would unfortunately divorce from Roy. As Cindy was growing up, there never seemed to be any kind of mental health issues on her end. She grew up relatively, normal, as normal as you could possibly say, I guess. She was always perceived as a very honest person, which kind of makes her story all that more insane. Roughly 3 months after she divorced from Roy, on October 7th, 1982, Cindy would receive her very first bizarre phone call. When she answered, the person on the other end was just breathing, heavily breathing. That would only be the beginning. She started to receive more phone calls, this time a very low whisper of presumably a man whispering her name over and over again. She, of course, would ask who it was, but they would never say who it was. Then one night, she answered the phone, and feeling uncomfortable, she would draw her blinds closed. And the caller said, "Why are you doing that? You can't hide from me." Meaning that this caller was somewhere outside her home. This caller would seem to know exactly where in the house Cindy was at the time of that call. And then it escalated. She began to hear footsteps around her porch, tapping at her windows. The tapping then became more violent when this mysterious person started to throw small rocks at her windows. One night, this person smashed her porch lights so that it was pitch dark whenever she answered the door. She then received her very first note. The note was the stereotypical ransom style note from movies with the magazine words cut out and pasted on paper. Her first note, it just said, "Soon, Cindy." And then her telephone line was cut. She had the telephone line fixed. The calls came back. Just more whispers, more breathing, more terror. When Cindy would finally go to police, the RCMP or the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, they would realize through talking to Cindy that the phone calls were never long enough to be traced. Meaning whoever was calling her and doing this probably knew this information. At first, the police would go to her house whenever there was a mysterious phone call or sounds coming from outside the house. They would do a cursory check around, and they would never find anyone. Except one night, they found her ex-husband, Roy Makepeace. He had a gun in his hand, and he was lurking in an alleyway near her home. Mr. Makepeace would say that he was there to protect Cindy, because apparently Cindy had told him about these calls as well. During this beginning stages of investigation, Cindy would fall for one of the officers. His name was Pat McBride. Pretty quickly, he would end up staying in her home as kind of like, added protection. Now, while he was in the house, nothing bizarre seemed to happen. No phone calls, no tapping on the windows, etc. About a month or two later, he decided to move out of the house. And then, January 27th, 1983, things took a very violent turn. A good friend of Cindy's, her name was Agnes Woodcock, would go to her home that evening. Agnes would knock on her door, no one answered. That's when Agnes decided to walk around and went towards the garage, where she found Cindy. She found her with a black nylon stocking tied tightly around her neck, and she appeared to have been cut with something, but there were no weapons or anything nearby. Police were called and they got there quickly. Cindy told police that she heard someone knocking on her back door, so when she went to answer it, she was met by someone who she couldn't tell who it was. This person had another friend, I guess, with them. They forced Cindy to the garage, where they then tied her up and started to, kind of cut her a little bit. Cindy claimed to not know who the people were. So police would actually end up giving her a lie detector test, and they found out that she was not being truthful with regards to the question about not knowing who it was. Cindy would still tell police that she was not going to say who it was, because apparently one of the attackers threatened to harm members of her family should she tell anything to police. And then it escalated further. On the 1-year anniversary, if you will, of the first phone call, she came across a horrific image outside of her home. When she walked out this particular evening, hanging from a branch of a tree were 3 deceased cats. And there was a note attached to them, and it just said, "You're next." This is when Cindy decided to hire her own private investigator. His name was Ozzy Caban. Fast forward to January 30th, 1984. Ozzy had heard some strange noises coming from a little radio that he gave to Cindy so that way he could communicate with her. This is obviously before, cell phones and whatnot. He drove to her home in a hurry because the noises sounded like a struggle was occurring. When he got to her home, he managed to get inside, and she was lying in the living room. She was unconscious. She once again had a black nylon tied tightly around her neck, and she had a knife literally stabbed through her hand. And attached to that knife was another note. The note said, "Now you must die." Cindy would tell police that she noticed some kind of shadows outside of her home that evening. And the next thing she knows, someone was knocking her over the head with something. She also claims she felt a needle being injected into her arm. This is when police began to suspect that something feels amiss. Around the house, there were no signs of forced entry. The door wasn't busted in. There were no broken windows. Nothing of the sort. When she said that they had put a needle in her arm, they brought her to the hospital, of course, and they tested her blood, and they found nothing in her system. Her ex-husband, Roy Makepeace, was brought in for questioning around this time. One, because of the incident where he was found outside of her home with a gun, but also, I guess, police found out that he had been a little violent with her during their marriage. But after questioning him, they really didn't have anything to hold him on, so they let him go. Now we're into July of 1984. Cindy is attacked once again. This time, they find actual needle marks in her arms. And again, the signature black stocking is tied around her neck. Police, just doing their due diligence, would basically have like a surveillance outside of her home. It essentially was 24-hour surveillance. They also decided to tap her phone lines so that they could listen in on any calls that may come in. But after doing this for a few months, nothing ever happened. Not one incident. And then they canceled this aspect of their investigation. There was no more wiretaps and there was no more surveillance. And then an attack happened. December 11th, 1985. Ooh, I was just, 8 months old? Oh, that's cute. Cindy woke up in a ditch 6 miles from her house. Again, needle marks in her arms, nylon stocking around her throat. Soon after this, Cindy's friend Agnes and Agnes's husband would end up staying with Cindy for protection. On a night in April of 1986, Cindy rushed into the bedroom they were sleeping in, and she said, "I heard a noise. There's a noise outside the house." This time, there was a witness. Agnes's husband, Tom, he said he heard the noise too. He would run down to the basement where they thought the noises were coming from, and guess what? The whole basement was on fire. They're trying to throw water on the fire, they're trying to get the fire down, while they're also calling the police to get, firemen on the way. Around somewhere in the middle of all of this, Tom goes out to the front of the house, and he sees kind of like the silhouette of a man. He couldn't really get any kind of good look at him. And the man was just standing there. And then as Tom began to walk towards him, this mysterious figure then just bolted. He ran away. Police did a thorough investigation. The RCMP said that the only way this intruder could have gotten into the basement and then out without being seen by anyone else in the house is through a window in the basement. Now, the window sill had a thick layer of dust on it. There were no markings through it to indicate that someone had climbed through the windowsill. They dusted the entire area around the window. They dusted parts of the basement that weren't on fire for fingerprints. They came up with no foreign fingerprints at all. But whoever did it could have also been wearing gloves, but that does not explain why there was no disturbance at the windowsill. And again, this was just an assumption by the police that the only way the person could have gotten in is through this particular window. I mean, there were other points of entry into the house. Everyone was asleep when the incident started. The RCMP, they would accuse Cindy of starting the fire herself. Which, to be fair, is a possibility because, again, no one saw the intruder, but also no one saw Cindy, so they couldn't totally rule out that Cindy may have done it and then ran upstairs to wake up her friends. Charges were not pressed against Cindy, however. She would then basically be admitted into a psychiatric hospital. One, because people were concerned that all of these incidents were adding up and she could potentially become, she might want to end her own life. She said that she felt that by possibly ending her own life would be the easiest way out of this horrific situation she has found herself in. When she was released from the hospital, she got fired from her job. She then moved to a new home. She changed her last name, this is how she got the last name James. She even painted her car. She made all of these cosmetic changes in her life to hopefully get rid of this mysterious person who has been terrorizing her for a very long time now. Guess what? For a year, it worked. She got no phone calls, no tapping on her windows, no mysterious fires being set, no animals being hung from trees. She seemed to be improving mentally. She was seeing a therapist, and They said, you know what, her mental state is definitely increasing. She's happier, she's smiling more, she's not as scared to, leave her home. Something I want to point out is that at one point during all of this, Cindy did have a dog. And one of the reasons why police were kind of concerned that Cindy may have been staging all of this for attention, I guess, is Cindy would still take her dogs for walks, even at night. Like, she did not seem to care about taking her dog out, and this was observed by police. But a year after, she had moved and all that, and she was happier and all that, it started again. In October of 1988, Cindy was found inside of her own vehicle, and she was unconscious. She had nothing on from the waist down. She had the typical black nylon stocking tied tightly around her neck, and this time she was hog-tied. I don't know about you, but hog-tying yourself seems pretty difficult. Now, I am a chunker, so I probably couldn't do it, but I don't know. Cindy was a thin woman. She was in good shape. Maybe she could have done it herself. I don't know. And that is when she finally said, I believe that Roy is responsible for these attacks. I think Roy is doing this. But police, after investigating him, he had an alibi for one of the major attacks. He was not even in the country when this attack happened. And then on May 25th, 1989, Cindy vanished. She was gone into that good night. She had just gotten herself a new job as a nurse, and on the day she went missing, she deposited a check into her account, and she was observed doing this. She then went grocery shopping. She went to purchase a gift for a friend, and then on that same night, Cindy had like a game night planned with, some of her girlfriends. But when they arrived at Cindy's home that night, she wasn't there. Agnes, who was one of the friends who was going to the house, obviously she kicked into high gear because she knows everything that had been happening. So she searched around the entire house, the garage, everywhere, and she couldn't find her. And Cindy's car also wasn't in the driveway. And that's because Cindy's car was parked in a mall parking lot. In her car were the groceries she had purchased, the gift she had bought. All that was missing was Cindy. Police would investigate the car. There was blood on the driver's side of the car. Not a lot of blood, but there was some there. 2 weeks later, on June 8th, 1989, Cindy was found. She was found in the overgrown yard of an abandoned home. Her hands were tied completely around her back, and her feet were tied behind her back. She appeared to have been punched several times because her whole face was just bruised horribly. But what was Cindy's cause of death? Well, this is interesting. An overdose of morphine. The coroner would determine that, a dose of this magnitude of morphine could take anywhere between 15 to maybe 30 minutes to kick in and possibly end a person's life. So police said she did that to herself, and then she tied herself up. Now, I can't show you the photo for obvious reasons, but it's actually pretty easily found on Google. You can find how her body was found, and I'm looking at it right now, and I don't know if it's possible to tie yourself up the way she was found. But apparently it is possible because some people have, I guess, recreated it. Like I stated earlier in the video, Cindy James never showed any signs of mental health issues as she was growing up. She always got the attention she needed. Even with a family with 6 kids, she got attention. She was doing well for herself, as she got older. She, went to nursing school. She got herself a really great job. She found a husband, Not a great one, but she found a husband. There was really nothing to ever indicate why she would make this sudden turn to doing all of this if she was the one doing it to herself. The problem that I personally have, and that other people have too, is that there were people in the home when the fire was set that one time. A couple of phone calls that she did receive, she was actually in the presence of a friend or two. So, and they heard it. Now, this did not happen often, almost never, but there were occasions where it did happen where someone was there. So how did she call herself? Did she hire someone to do it? And why? Would she really stab herself through the hand with the note? I mean, that seems really extreme, but again, it's obviously possible. When her car was found, it had a whole, back seat full of groceries and a gift, and why would she buy all that and then go die? Like, I guess maybe to throw people off, but at that point, what would be the point, right? What does Cindy James gain from ending her life in this fashion? If it's for attention, she wouldn't be around to receive the attention. Maybe she didn't realize the amount of morphine she took was lethal. They didn't find any drugs in her system from the other occasions, so maybe she bumped up the amount just so it would read something on a test, but not realizing that that was too much. And while it can be recreated, it's still not the easiest thing to tie yourself up in that particular fashion. But again, it is possible. So ultimately, the question remains, did Cindy do this to herself? Or did someone else do it to Cindy? Is this a case of the girl who cried wolf? If someone did this to her, like possibly her ex-husband, for what? Why? What do they have to gain from this? There were no life insurance policies. Is he just a sick man who just wanted to torture his ex-wife? Was this all just super random? It's all unknown. But someone, somewhere out there, likely knows the truth. Maybe that someone is you. But for now, this is still very much an unsolved mystery. And that is it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed. I will definitely be back for more, of course, so please subscribe to my wonderful little YouTube channel. And if you don't already, follow me over on TikTok. I'm also making a true crimerer over there. I have about 2.6 million followers, so trying to get them all over here, but that'll be a work in progress. Make sure you check out my Linktree, which is in the description below and also in my YouTube profile area, I guess, or my About section. In the Linktree, you can find my case list for all the cases I have on there to eventually cover. If you don't see a name on there, because it's a public list, you can send an email to truecrimerer@gmail.com, which I will also put below, to recommend a case to me. You just have to give me the name, when it happened, where it happened, if you know all that, and then I can add it to my list. And you can also find our wonderful little merch store in there. We sell shirts and hoodies. We sell beanies, mugs, and we sell a new wine glass. And more will eventually be on the way. So that's also in the link tree below. But until the next video, we shall see ya. And yeah, ta-ta for now. True crime-eroonies.